Hey, it's me again. I guess even with crippling social isolation and a gun to my head, I still can't make a video before 2 whole weeks have passed. Here I have gathered before you all of the worst perks in the game to be fucking shot dead like bottles before a BB gun and an unsupervised child. Not because I have issues, but because you do. The goal here is to take some of the worst perks in the game and actually make them playable for a change. Mind you, I'm literally just a bored prick sitting in this quarantine zone, so if you're taking this seriously, don't. We could start with the one everyone hates, Hex, no one escapes death. So I know that some people out here don't think this perk needs nerfing and
I disagree.
Even if you want to say that survivors need to get good, the simple fact is that you are objectively better with this perk in your build. So it either needs a nerf to be in line with the other perks, or every other killer perk in the game needs to be brought up to its standard. Personally, I'd somewhat prefer the latter, but the amount of work that would require is a little bit too much to ask. Lord knows what magic the developers' Suicide Watch team is doing, and I don't want to make their job any harder. The perk allows the killer to have access to a one-hit down and a speed boost once the final generator pops up, leaving its power on a hex totem for survivors to break. The counterplay for No One Escapes Death is to break every totem before the final generator pops. Now, to briefly play devil's advocate, I've always thought of it like unlocking the secret ending in a game by doing side objectives. If you put in the extra effort, woohoo, here's your free teabag at the gates. If not, here's your complimentary bad ending. Though, I'm going to try and spice things up by making it a bit more fluid. Here's my rework. You are animated by the power of your hex totems when the survivors are on the verge of escaping. When the exit gates are active, every remaining dull totem becomes a hex totem. For each hex totem, gain a speed buff of 1%, 2%, 3%. As long as one hex totem is active, all survivors are exposed. Striking a healthy survivor will automatically destroy a random hex totem. The idea here is to downplay the ridiculous snowball effect and still leave its original form of counterplay intact, meaning that you can still fight back by breaking totems, but if you miss one that's hidden in the fucking corner of Matthew Cote's winning smile, it's not an instant game changer. If the totems break themselves when you strike a healthy survivor, you're rewarded for keeping totems, but you're not overwhelmingly punished as a survivor. Eventually you're going to run out of totems and lose the buff, which makes it better than the instant win button we have now. I think it perfectly keeps the perk true to its original vision with some slight nerfs. Whatever, fuck you, I think it's great. Starkly on the other side of that last perk, here's one that's so goddamn useless that it would have joined an Uncharted multiplayer esports team. It's called Cruel Limits, and every time a generator pops, every nearby vaultable wall gets blocked for 30 seconds. It's actually kind of a cool idea, and I don't throw that around lightly. The problem is that the current timer of 30 seconds is short. Really short. It's also map specific. I've run this perk and there are several times where a generator pops and straight up nothing happens because there are no nearby vaults. So instead, whenever a generator is completed, every vault location in a 32-meter radius of that generator is blocked. This effect persists until another generator is completed. The purpose here is to give the perk a sense of fluidity and an actual effect. Keeping the vaults blocked until the next generator pops makes it so that survivors have to actually run into it at some point. It also gives survivors a bit of counterplay. You can kind of go, oh shit, he's got that one blocked, I'll hop on this generator to fix that. There's still the problem where you can pop a generator and end up without any walls being blocked, but I've got Photoshop, not the healing might of Jesus Christ. Remember me. Each time you hit your obsession, you increase the exit gate opening time by 4 seconds up to a maximum of 32 seconds. This effect is halved once the endgame collapse has begun. So some of you might not even notice what I've changed here except for that last part, so allow me to explain a bit. I've doubled the amount of stacks you can get from 4 to 8. At the moment, it only grants 16 seconds as an entire buff, which is like barely anything. Adding an extra 16 seconds to the timer could be pretty clutch in those situations. Plus, the perk was designed to incentivize you letting the obsession heal so that you could get more stacks, but if the main limit is 4 like we have now, why shouldn't I just tunnel them into the drink? I know some people are probably thinking hitting a survivor 8 times is too much, and that's kind of the fucking point. Hell, even with this, it's still not a great perk. It's just what it used to be while also working with the endgame collapse, since the timer for it starts either when one gate is open or the hatch is shut. Having the timer is an okay idea. That way, if you're the lone survivor at the gate, you still have a fighting chance to get it open before it's too late. Territorial Imperative. When a survivor enters the basement, this perk activates. You will see the survivor's aura for the duration of the perk while staying 48, 40, 32 meters away from the basement. The survivor suffers the oblivious status effect for the duration that they're in the basement. This one is important because this might actually and wholeheartedly be the worst perk in Dead by Daylight. I don't even mean that in a joking way. This perk is so ungodly bad that I ran it as a meme during the single gameplay video I made. And the point of that video was to portray old Freddy at his absolute worst. Requiring the killer to be 5 postal codes away from the basement is insanely taxing. Hell, we can't even determine what the distance actually is. Does 42 meters away from the basement mean 42 meters away from its center? One of the corners of the room, it's nonsense. So my rework gives it purpose and presence, and something that actually does something. Think about it with me. The basement is basically a dead end. If the killer goes down there, you're screwed, but you have no way to tell if he's showing up or not. The killer can know you're in there, but you still have a fighting chance because he loses sight of you when he shows up. There's a lot of mental gymnastics that would go on here, and it would certainly be better than a perk that only activates when it's too late. Iron Maiden. You open lockers 30%, 40%, 50% faster. Every time a survivor enters a locker, survivors within a 32 radius of that locker have their aura revealed to you for 6 seconds. Yeah, haha, there's a typo, but I'm already making the video, so I'm not going to bother reusing my biblical powers to fix it. Get over it. Iron Maiden is the one perk in this video that might not need a rework. The only reason I'm reworking it is because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense and is pretty easy to counter. Right now, it only exists to stop people from hiding from barbecue and chili, which is not very exciting. I like this version because it sort of proposes a prisoner's dilemma. Save yourself at the risk of others. If you hide in the locker to avoid the killer, you're damning a friend that might be close by. But how do you know that they're not searching for a locker to hide in as you speak? There are some issues with this rework. It's hella situational, and lockers are basically F tier at the moment, but that's because of a fundamental design thing that a perk rework can't exactly fix. This last perk is a bit insane, but I got excited while writing it, and no one is here to fucking stop me, so... Furtive Chase. You become obsessed with one survivor. Every time your obsession is put on the hook, gain a token. For each token, reduce the recovery rate of exhaustion, broken, and exposed status effects by 15% for a maximum of 2, 3, or 4 tokens. When the obsession is saved from the hook, the rescuer becomes the obsession. Right now, Furtive Chase is one of the most useless perks in the whole game. Its reward is so minimal, and if you actually want to change your obsession, Nemesis was introduced almost immediately after. So the goal here is to give killers a buff that justifiably demands that they excessively hunt down a constantly swapping obsession. The kicker is that this clearly messes with the few other perks out there, specifically the exposed perks, since the timers on them seem non-negotiable. That's why I situated this towards the middle of the video, because anyone who's been watching it this long must have already recognized my genius, but I think that something like this is way better than, ooh, your terror radius is small when you've already fucking found someone. I think Furtive Chase is actually kind of a pain in the ass to level up, especially if one of the players is a fucking coward weenie and just won't come out of that stupid It's a hard concept to implement, but I can actually see it working its way into player builds without killers thinking it's useless. The only thing in the way is a perceived invisible rule about affecting other perks, which is punishable by a public stoning. There's also a lot of room for interplay with popular perks like Deliverance, Make Your Choice, and every exhaustion perk. Granted, if you do the math, a perk like Make Your Choice could extend to 96 seconds, and that might be a bit ridiculous, but you'd still need to earn it. That's all I've got for current perks, but sometimes I wonder, what if I was a game developer? What if I didn't fail every fucking class I took that was vaguely related to design? What if I just made my own perks and pretended I was smart enough to show them off? Basically, I'm gonna reference that one time I made my own fan chapter. Yeah, I know, I was a Redditor once, and it was disgusting. But I never did my diligence by filling out the perks in that fan chapter, so I thought I'd do it here. If you're looking at what's on your screen, you'll notice that the chapter was pirate-themed. Why did I pick that? Beats the fuck out of me. But here I have 2 perks that aren't reworks, but just something I wanted to see in the game. The first one was a desire to mix both a Hex perk and an Obsession perk. Siren's Call. A hex rooting itself on ignorance. This perk will persist as long as the associated hex totem stands. You become obsessed with one survivor. Survivors who come within a 6, 8, 10 meter of the obsession will suffer the oblivious status effect. This effect will persist for 8 seconds after the survivor leaves the radius. The obsession is not affected by Siren's Call. The whole point here is to create some dynamic play between survivors and other survivors, to somewhat ward them away from each other, discourage team play, or in certain situations have them act selfishly. I think that this works really well with other perks out there, especially some of the new ones that feel like they were designed for matchups that don't fucking exist yet. Survive with Friends might make this a bit easier to live with, even if the totem hasn't been already removed in the first 5 seconds, but my goal here is to design the way I think the devs would. Though in terms of Survive with Friends, I've added the 8 seconds after you leave. That way the perk can still affect you even when no one else is nearby to tell you they hear a heartbeat. Plus, I just feel like there's no Hex Obsession perks yet, and it sounds like a pretty dynamic duo. Chances are good it would have niche appeal since killer mains just want perks that make the bad survivor boys and girls explode when they touch a generator, but I digress. Though if you thought this perk sounded a bit unrealistic, I've got bad news. First Mate spawns 1 Entity Shade. Entity Shades move between generators. If a survivor enters a proximity of 8, 10, 12 meters, the Shade will chase the survivor at 3.8 meters per second. If a survivor comes in contact, the Shade will injure a healthy survivor or inflict a deep wound on injured survivors. Stunning a Shade with a pallet will cause it to dissipate for 120, 80, 60 seconds. This is just for me, because I've always thought something like this would be cool, something external roaming the map that acted independent of the killer, kind of like having a small minion out there that is easily thwarted by survivors but still demands a bit of their attention. And I do say easily thwarted because when I wrote this, I kept it in mind that only idiots would end up getting hurt by this. For those who don't know, survivors run at 4 meters per second. The reason I decided to make this thing run at 3.8 meters per second is because it would be absolutely unfair for something like this to catch up to them in their normal capacity. Instead, I'd prefer if this acted as something of an independent disruptor. Since it's slower than you, it's not a threat, but it's a deterrent. If a survivor is doing a generator and this thing comes by, it's still going to force them off of it for a brief period of time. Or if survivors want to stick to the objective, they can just smash it with a pallet to keep it off their backs. The only thing I'd consider changing is making the shade a reward for pulling off something cool, because I can already hear the words "you're getting rewarded for doing nothing" ringing in my ears, despite several other perks throughout the game doing just that. That's the last one because I have too much pride to insert another OC Do Not Steal into this game when there are plenty of DeviantArt users doing it way better than me. Obviously, there are a lot of perks out there that people don't really like in this game, like there are only 8 socially acceptable perks at rank 1 and the rest are bad jokes. Anyone who's seen my tier list video can already see I'm pretty experimental in my builds, but that might just be the superpowers that come from being the biggest alpha PlayStation player in the world. By the way, huge shout out to everyone who watched that video and subscribed. I have now hit 1,000 subscribers. Let me know what other perks need fixing, or just propose your own reworks if you're bored and don't have any friends that would consider breaking quarantine to be in your presence. I know I have to go back behind this curtain for another 2 weeks until the fall of society claims me too.